We seem to have a... Oh, here we go. It's fixed. Okay. Hi, everyone. So I'm Nick Gaskell. I'm one of the partners at HawkinsBrown Architects. I appreciate you may not know us as well as you might know Zaha Hadid. So I'm just going to start with a bit of an intro about our practice and what we do, and then I'll talk about to Brent Cross Town, which is our unbuilt project. So this is us. We're about 330 people at last count. So this was a photo taken at one of our completed projects in London, a school. So yeah, we've grown over the last 5 years in particular, and grown a sort of series of specialisms and sort of sectors that we work across, which is ever expanding, and the locations we work in are ever expanding as well. Which are these? So at the point that we made this presentation, we had 5 offices across the UK, Ireland, and North America. We now have 6, actually. So we have opened in Toronto, in Canada, in the last couple of weeks. So like I say, we're sort of ever expanding. Our biggest studio is London. That's our base, that's our home. So we've got about 220 people there, and then 100 people spread across the remainder of the sort of offices. And we work across every sector, every scale of building. So there's some examples of the projects we've completed here. Personally, I work in the kind of work-based sector, so I lead our commercial sector efforts. But we work across master planning, education, workplace, residential, science and tech, infrastructure, cultural, healthcare, civic, and interior design. And part of that kind of expansion, I suppose, is the ability to kind of bring in-house expertise. So around all the project work we do, which sits as a sort of envelope, we have a sustainability team, digital design, MMC, technical delivery, research BIM, and visualization. So all of this sits in-house and supports what we do. And finally, we have a sort of in-house think tank. So that supports and underpins all of our project work. And we've used it to develop digital tools like our sort of built environment apps, urban data and social value, behavioral studies, and so on. So, you know, all of the project work we do, we try to underpin with research wherever possible. And sustainability is obviously, as you'd expect, a huge focus for us. We like to think about sustainability holistically, so we don't just talk about reducing carbon and focusing too much on embodied carbon, which is the hot topic of the moment, but think about the sort of whole life of the building, the lifespan of the building. How can we make a building as successful as possible for its users to sort of promote health and happiness alongside the sort of the carbon-focused tools and conversations that we're having on the sustainability kind of within the sustainability team. So we think these things can't be separated. We can't separate carbon discussions from wider discussions about design quality and the lifespan of buildings. Just as a sort of preamble, I suppose, to the project. I mean, we've historically worked in timber across multiple sectors. It's a sort of beautiful, tactile, warm material that is obviously kind of highly sustainable. This has come under increasing pressure in the UK in particular. Concerns around fire safety have meant that sort of regulations and insurance considerations have I suppose reduced the acceleration of the production of timber structures over the last sort of 2-3 years. We're seeing that turn around. We're seeing we'll talk about that towards the end of the presentation. But despite those kind of pressures, despite those kind of issues, we've managed to sort of produce and deliver several designs. So this one's City of Freeman School. It's a timber-framed single-span school pool for a private school in West London. We produced at the time the UK's largest hybrid timber structure, so it's the tallest timber structure in the UK. So this is Wenlock Cross. It's a residential scheme with a kind of rotating timber cross at the centre in plan, and then a sort of brick grid which wraps around as like a sort of carapace around the sort of outside of the building. And finally, we developed a research building in Warwick, which was developed in two parts, effectively. It's a lab and an office space. So the lab is a concrete structure, which deals with some of the vibration criteria you'd expect to see for a lab. And the timber structure is for office space. So we take every opportunity to sort of design in timber. So that sort of tees up the project I'd like to talk to you today about. This was a project we did for Related Argent, who are a developer who are best known probably in London at least for developing King's Cross. So they were delivering the sort of master plan around King's Cross over the last 10, 12 years. That includes the sort of the soon-to-be completed Google headquarters. Their next venture as a sort of developer is Brent Cross. So a very different location. It's on the outskirts of London. So these are the sort of inner ring road and the outer ring road of London. King's Cross being close to the centre. Brent Cross is a very different proposition, and I think the sort of character of the architecture that needs to respond to that needs to be kind of considered quite carefully. And what Related Argent are bringing forward is a new park town, in their words. So it's a proposal which creates a new green master plan for northwest London. So it includes 7,000 new homes, workspace for around 25,000 people, alongside a new retail high street, cultural uses, and so on. And when you consider the sort of the ground plane, essentially it's a sort of a mixed-use ground plane which includes kind of retail and cultural uses, which then links back to the new station at the west of the kind of master plan, and the green spaces to the south. So our plot, which you can see highlighted by the black arrows, sort of sits within this kind of wider kind of blanket of uses. And what we were tasked to create was essentially the workplace of the future. So this we started work on this project around the time of the start of the pandemic. Our client asked us to imagine, how do we respond to the sort of global challenges that we're all experiencing, not just the pandemic, but the climate crisis, social justice movements, and so on, and think about what the sort of workplace of the future should look like. So there are sort of 8 kind of qualities, I suppose, that we wanted to bring to that. So a crucible for innovation, socially engaged, healthy, connected, sustainable, low cost, high impact, nimble, and tech enabled. So we thought all of these qualities need to come together to respond to those kind of global challenges. And critical for us, I think, was creating something which was a crucible for innovation. So this needs to be a kind of a place which can bring together tenants of various types, institutions, smaller businesses, larger businesses, and enable innovation to happen in a way it can't happen elsewhere. So one of the things we did at the beginning of the project was to think about the sorts of historic structures which have been very, very good at enabling innovation. We thought quite broadly about that. So the image on the left-hand side is the garage of Steve Jobs' childhood home, and this is where he set up Apple in 1976 with Steve Wozniak. And the building on the right is building 20 on the MIT campus, which was a temporary wartime building, which was constructed essentially as a sort of temporary structure, but lasted about 50 years. And actually, at one point, housed the highest number of Nobel Prize winners anywhere in the world. So, became an incredible kind of structure for facilitating innovation. And our hypothesis, I suppose, for our sort of new proposal for innovation, an innovative workplace, is that a space for innovation is one that enables users to take control, take risks. It's affordable. It invites hacking or knocking about, and it plugs into a wider life support system. So where we sat within the master plan was essentially between a new square so a sort of urban setting, and the extended park to the south of the master plan. So we were sort of mediating between these two conditions, from urban to natural. And we created a sort of ground floor diagram which enabled people to sort of filter through the building, the ground floor of the building, as they sort of transitioned from the square to the park, creating a new office entrance on the square side, and then amenity spaces which had a view to the south and towards the park itself. And some sketch ideas and visualizations of that ground floor plane. And what we wanted to create was a kind of a place where culture and kind of workplace can come together. So we called it a sort of marketplace of ideas. And essentially it was creating this large-scale ground floor volume, which was very open to the public realm surrounding the building. And had all the tools for large, small-scale events, meeting, and so on, across the ground floor and a sort of mezzanine structure. So this was sort of fundamental to how we felt that tenants within the building could interact with the wider public and communities. And we created upper floors, which were speculative workspaces, essentially. So had to be flexible, subdivisible, so they could cater for every scale of tenant, and gave the tenants the ability to, I suppose, reconfigure the space and find their own way of kind of using it. It included the sort of parkside terrace spaces, which you can see an image on the left-hand side. The second, I suppose, big conceptual discussion we had was around the quality of the architecture. So we thought about this kind of paradox or hybrid, the hybrid nature of a kind of structure or what it could be. And we thought it would be kind of interesting to start to think about how we could create something which felt medieval but also modern. So there were two building precedents we looked to think about this. So the one on the left is Little Morton Hall. It's in the north of England, in Cheshire. It's actually a building my parents used to take me when I was younger, and have walks around and so on. But it's one of the sort of best examples of a half-timbered house in England. So a very traditional building style in timber, but one which has a sort of tactile and sort of decorative quality, but is absolutely driven by structural considerations. So the sort of structure is the outward embodiment of the kind of character of the building, I suppose. And it kind of creates qualities of tactility, long life, robustness, crafted, low carbon, expressive. The fact that it still survives is a kind of testament to its kind of sustainability, I suppose. And what we wanted to think about is how could you sort of take that and combine it with a sort of modern sensibility. So the sort of obviously the preeminent kind of the godfather of the sort of modern office, the Seagram building in New York, which has the kind of qualities of rationality, efficiency. It's serviced, it's flexible, it's consistent, it's tech-enabled, and has a kind of beauty through its kind of repetition and kind of simplicity, I suppose. So this was an early concept sketch of the elevation, how this would start to come together. It's essentially like a sort of modern timber warehouse. So very simple, very rationally ordered timber grid, which then provides the kind of the stage set, the kind of the volume for the activities within. And we imagined creating that sort of framework, which was expressed on the outside of the building, and then hanging all of the sort of elements that you might want to see off that, so staircases, balconies, of large sort of large volume ground floor for the sort of cultural and sort of meeting spaces, and then thinking about the sort of roofscape, which we'll come on to a little bit later on. And then a sort of external palette of materials, which are very, very simple, very sort of robust. So a timber frame expressed externally, but then using kind of really industrial, simple, almost prosaic materials, which kind of sit within that grid and hang off that grid. So we looked to the meatpacking district in New York, for instance, for the sort of large deep canopies which hang off that building and create a sort of generosity around the sort of entrances and the surrounding public realm. And we looked at sort of these large-scale kind of playful signage that sort of marks corners and so on. So there's a framework, but there are these kind of things that can kind of happen around the framework. And these are a few of the CGIs which we developed. So this is a view from the park to the south of the site, looking across to the parkside balconies, which kind of hang off the sort of the main timber frame. And you can see through to the sort of the double heights ground floor, which kind of houses the sorts of spaces that I was talking about earlier. And then on the other side of the building, so this is the view as you approach the building from the station, looking across Station Square, through to the entrance underneath the sort of canopy projecting out, and you can just get a glimpse of the kind of roofscape that we were creating. So really deliberately stripped back, very, very simple timber structure. And we've just got a few sections here just to sort of demonstrate how that sort of stacks through the sort of building. So thinking about a kind of a hierarchy of uses from ground, middle to the top of the building. Again, we'll come on to the roofscape in a second. This is a section to the entrance space to the double height volume behind. And the roofscape. So I think one of the themes of the wider master plan is around health and well-being. That's why there's this big focus on greenery and linking people with nature. I think we're very cognizant that often modern workplaces don't provide opportunities for mental health, mental well-being. So actually finding spaces for privacy is a really important thing to do. So how we can use the roofscape to create smaller scale spaces for private work, small scale meetings and so on was sort of really important to how we think about sort of mental health. And this is a view of one of the potential spaces within the middle section of the building. So looking towards the balcony spaces overlooking the park, and thinking about how tenants can start to hack and kind of create staircases connecting between floors and create creative space, which is absolutely something we want to do to kind of help them take ownership of the building. And finally, the roofscape, which was an opportunity for us to think quite playfully about how we can create space for innovation. So we called this Hutopia, and it was inspired by historic structures, I suppose, which artists, creatives had kind of worked within and used as a sort of outlet, I suppose, for private thought. So it's everything from Steve Jobs' garage to Diogenes' barrel to to Snoopy's kennel. So thinking really playfully about the sorts of small-scale kind of structures which we don't often find in kind of the modern workplace. And here's the sort of full list. So interestingly, the vast majority of these are small-scale, very simple, very prosaic timber structures. And this is a view of how that sort of roofscape might play out. So, I mean, this one, didn't come to fruition for us, unfortunately. We've drawn on this to create further proposals for timber workplaces, which we're very hopeful over the next few months will kind of come forward. So we think a lot of this kind of thinking and this work can I suppose, embed itself into future projects. I mean, as a wider commentary, I think there's been as I said before, there's been a downturn in sort of timber structure development in the UK. But we're actually seeing generally a move coming out of that. So actually, because of the lessons learned from a lot of the testing, a lot of the regulatory kind of discussions we've been having as an industry in the UK, there's a huge amount of data now, there's a huge amount of testing which allows us to draw on that, and actually now we have agreed ways of delivering timber structures, which gives us a really solid foundation for kind of pushing these sorts of buildings forward in the future. So we're actually despite this not going forward and despite the sort of slowdown in timber structures more generally, I think we're very hopeful that there's a positive future for the use of timber in the UK and internationally as well. So thank you.